Alright, what's going on, guys? Elden Ring DLC is on the way, and as of right now, while we don't have any concrete information about what it's going to contain, what an expansion of this masterpiece is going to look like, or where a continuation of this journey will take us, one thing that Elden Ring does fantastically is give us such a grand scope, where our imagination can run wild in prediction of what exactly Shadow of the Erdtree is going to be. So today I want to outline 5 major things that I think Elden Ring DLC really needs, and that I would be absolutely overjoyed to see them add to upgrade this game even further beyond what it already is. But before we dive into that, let me go ahead and tell you about 2 things. Number 1, we're getting super close to 100k subscribers here on the channel, so if you would like to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring, Armored Core, and FromSoftware, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and help the channel reach that major milestone. And number 2, I'm giving away a copy of FromSoftware's next game, Armored Core 6, and all you gotta do to have a chance of winning that is be subscribed to the channel, leave a like on the video, and let me know what the main thing you want to see in Elden Ring DLC is. But with all that, let's go ahead and get into the list. Now, this might be the singular most important one to a lot of people, and personally, I think it may be the one I'm counting on the most, but Elden Ring DLC desperately needs to tie up a lot of loose ends in the lore. Now, you guys know very well I love the mysterious, unanswered, and speculative side of the story of these games, and we have lots of videos here on the channel of complete crackpot theories, such as Elden Ring is about mushrooms. But when it comes to Elden Ring lore, we have far more questions than we do answers, and these aren't just simple one-off questions that don't really need an explanation. I'm talking about the foundational building blocks of the story that we're discussing with complete guesswork, and I'll go ahead and list off a few. Number 1, what is the Crucible? Number 2, what is the Helfen in the spirit world? Number 3, what actually are the fingers, and why do they have their powers? Number 4, what did the shattering actually do, and what was the end goal of the shattering? And number 5, is Queen Marika even real? All of those seem like questions that we have answers to, but we really don't, and that's the problem with interpreting this story. Since so many core foundational principles of this game are left open-ended, it's very possible to make a coherent argument for just about anything. And while I am painfully guilty of that, I know I'm not the only one that's starting to want a little bit of answers. Elden Ring's story is abstract by design, and I know we all love the mystery of it, but the fact is the mysteries in this game are so good that it would be a crime not to solve some of them. And at least for me, I would like to explore the lore that we already have before we start to pile even more confusion on top of it. But thankfully, a lot of the elements we got in the preview image were recognizable, so I think that there's a pretty good chance that this happens. Up next on the list, I would like to see more weapon types. Now, this is something that has been leaked for a while. Back in the data mine of patch 1.07, it was discovered that FromSoftware at least put the parameters in place to add several new weapon types, but it's not a guarantee that they're going to do it. That being said, if this does end up becoming a reality, here's a few that I would like to see. For a game that allows you to wield pretty much any weapon that's present in the world, even boss weapons, one of the only ones that cannot drop for the player are the Crystallian ring blades. These things have such a unique and cool moveset, and I'm really surprised that we didn't actually get a variant at least, since the Crystallian is a humanoid enemy, and we already have plenty of weapons with some crazy movesets. But if the player could wield these, that would make for a great medium range option, with some swipes for close range attacks, as well as being able to roll it on the ground just like the enemy does. But on top of just being super stylish, I could definitely see some interesting build options here. Now, one weapon type that either needs an entire overhaul or a new type altogether are flails. Even after the latest patch when they got a major buff, they are still by far the worst weapon type, borderline unusable in certain situations. So if I had to imagine a way to make flails better, I would introduce a heavy flail, a weapon type with a large object on a medium length chain that would be fairly slow but deal massive posture damage. When I think about it, I think about that one from Lord of the Rings, but like double or triple the length. But what are some new weapon types y'all would like to see? Let me know down in the comments below. The next two are kinda gonna go together, although they're not the same. But for the first one of the most fun aspects of the Souls games needs to make a grand comeback in DLC, and those are dedicated PvP areas. For those of you that are new to Elden Ring, let me briefly explain what these are. Back in the day, there were certain parts of the map where you would get invaded by other players who were in covenants to defend those areas. And while it might have been annoying for a new player, they were designed very well, and the games had systems in place where you would naturally get help from those and other covenants, until massive wars would break out, ending when either the host died or made it past the area. And I cannot stress enough, these are some of the most fun times I've ever had in a Souls game. I mean, some of my first content on here was just capturing funny moments that would happen whenever I would play in these areas, getting engaged in these wars over and over again for hours without getting bored. But beyond simply being fun, they created a sense of community that's noticeably lacking in Elden Ring. However, now that the Colosseums have proved that Elden Ring can handle 6 players at a time, there's really nothing stopping FromSoftware from bringing these back. And if they did, it could really be the boon needed to revive PvP in Elden Ring, and let a lot of these new players experience the joy that we had back then of how truly unique and special the online aspects of these games can be. Building off the topic of the last one, Elden Ring needs to take a page out of the Dark Souls games when it comes to the Colosseum. Now, the Colosseum DLC was great for its time, and was exactly what Elden Ring needed, but it had a few problems. Problems that persist even now, and we'll start with the most glaring. First and foremost being that unless you're doing a 1v1 duel, it is nearly impossible to find a match. Now, the most recent patch did state that they were going to improve the matchmaking, but you really can't tell. As it stands at the moment, anything beyond 2 players is virtually impossible. Secondly, there's no incentive for participation in the Colosseum. You don't get any rewards, besides an upgrade to your arbitrary rank that shows up in the side of the screen. And there are no leaderboards to showcase this rank, so again, not much of a reason to want it. But beyond that, we only have one map available to us. Now, yes, you can change the area the map is set in, but the geography remains the same. And all of this combines for an unsatisfactory experience in these Colosseums, objectively making it the worst in FromSoftware history. And it wasn't like this in the past. The Colosseums in the Dark Souls games all had multiple maps, much more consistent matchmaking, and at least in Dark Souls 2 some worthwhile rewards. So I do hope that Shadow of the Erdtree gives these Colosseums a major overhaul, making them something that can be enjoyed much more than in their present state, and that encourages people to play for the long term. But I am optimistic that we will see some changes when it comes to the DLC, because FromSoftware and Bandai Namco are very considerate about the future of PvP. I just think they had their hands full when crafting these Colosseums in Elden Ring, and some of the recent news we've covered here on the channel definitely points to that. If there was one feature that would have made the world of Elden Ring significantly better and would have fit gracefully in this setting, it would be covenants, especially since the primary event on the world was a battle between factions. As the player, being able to pledge your loyalty to one of these factions would have very much amplified the RPG elements of the game. And admittedly, there were several times when I was playing through Elden Ring for the first time that I was confused about why I was fighting a certain boss, because the way a certain quest was setting up, it seemed like I would be able to work with them, the most notable of those being Moog and Melania, who were both already optional bosses. But DLC would be a great time to introduce covenants, even if they don't directly tie into the current bosses or leaders of the faction that we can find in the present game. If we get new areas for the DLC, which I do think we will, then perhaps introduce covenants pertaining to those areas, just to give that extra hand in making the world feel more alive, and adding more to the RPG feeling. We got a taste of this with the Recusants in Volcano Manor, because that quest is exactly how covenants worked in the past games, and I do think that that's what it was supposed to be, since the Recusant finger isn't really any different than your standard invasions. But since it does appear like covenants were a planned thing for Elden Ring, since we can find the rank up parameters in the files, I do think there's a great chance they make a comeback in DLC, at least in some capacity. Anyways though guys, that's gonna pretty much do it for my personal picks about what I want to see in the DLC. I tried to pick ones that I think have a decent chance to show up, instead of running too wild with the speculation. I am really curious to see what you guys come up with though, but if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you want to be entered into the giveaway. Check out those links down in the description below if you want to get further involved in the community. And with all that, I will catch you in the next one.